I'm not going to, why don't we go through, we won't need to go through the sort of how you arrived at the, revenue. We did that yesterday, so we just need to start figuring out how it flows out.
Yep.
What we put on the money and then what we are going to move to the contingent list.
Yep, and so there is, and so for the record, Emily Byrne from the fiscal office, there is actually one very, very small change in the very first line on the revenue side that I just want to touch on really quick. So there was in the Budget Adjustment Act, we allocated a good chunk of change to towns to help with flooding. We found that there was the spreadsheet that we have that was labeled draft all over it had the wrong number in it for Hardwick. So in talking with the administration, we know that we're gonna need an additional $15,000 in FY 2024 to cover Hardwick. So that very first number is different by $15,000. Just want to make that clear that the intent in the bill is to add to update that language, to include a little bit of additional extra money to cover, so that it aligns, the FEMA grant money aligns based on the sort of courthouse that were created.
This is it, done for the week. I've shut down my kitchen. No more cooking. Uh-oh, there's pressure. Somebody will have to do it.
So what line was that?
That's the very first
At
line,
the very
that's line A. Because it's a 24 change, it's gonna take the amount that you have from 24 into 25 down by $15,000.
Yeah. That was just an error that, an expenditure did not end up on the, list that was sent to us by the recovery office, and so this is simply to make that correction. All right, thank you for pointing that out, so now we'll keep going.
Yeah, keep going. The other updates that we made since yesterday, and you'll notice at the very bottom that this is a balance now. So in conversations we've had, go back to the contingent list, but we left $1 million in for the manufactured home improvement program. We're gonna move all of VHIP to the contingent list. And I believe there's also
There's money, also from the housing bill that's coming out of our housing committee this is where it gets complicated because we're crosswalking multiple bills. But there is, money in the bill that economic development has passed out also for VHIP, and that's $1 million. And so, the governor had proposed 6. Question for us is that if there's $1 million in the other bill, that leaves a difference of 5, and how much we have that would fall to the contingent appropriation, how much that would be. So, and I want to remind people that we already are starting out with 23.5 million on that contingent appropriation list that we have agreed to. That's 20 million for the emergency housing, and the other 3.5 million for the impacted homes that could have flood risk mitigated already. So just as a reminder of what else we've discussed here. So that's the complexity around VHIP. We're also putting in some language that was requested relative to households with in a disabled member. So we are taking, so the Senate is agreeing with the House on that. Okay, let's keep going then, Emily.
Yep. The next one in blue, you'll see 622, DO non-emergency transport. This just passed Senate Health and Welfare, and this is actually an update based on the fiscal note that came out. This was 30,000. This I think was $300,000 yesterday. It should have been 30, so that was an error, a technical error on my part.
Oh,
And then it's actually $30,000 of ongoing expense. So that will be on the base appropriations. But that was a technical save, I guess, catch this morning.
how much? 30?
30. It was at 300,
It's 300.
but it should have been at 30, and then 30 is actually a base.
Well, it's only a matter of zeros.
It's just one keystroke,
I
right?
know.
The whole budget.
Yeah. All
So
right.
anyway, that one has been updated
Yeah.
based on, I worked with Nolan to make sure the new fiscal note matches the new fiscal note. This morning.
Mhm.
So then, nothing else changes until we get to the new Senate, one-time appropriations in the green box below.
Mhm.
I'll jump around.
Instead of one.
Yeah, one appropriation. That should be one time. I'm gonna jump around a little bit. I'll start with line 53. We were carrying a one-time appropriation to help capitalize the unsafe dam revolving loan fund. That has been zeroed out on this and moved over to contingency. Below that, line 55, based on conversations in committee, the urban search and rescue number has been reduced to 250.
Which is the amount that was in the bill as we moved it, we stripped out the appropriation. So,
So
And-
the 1.1 million is to implement the streaming tax?
no, yes, it is. The tax department said it would be a new tax line, and so they had to do the necessary program to set up. And so, but in the other place, we have the revenue, so all it is more than offset by the revenues generated by the new
Wow.
tax. Which is,
Oh, since they already have a streaming tax, I don't know why it costs 1.1 billion to implement another, it's just because they're opposed to it.
I don't,
Really?
no, we don't, that,
Yeah, we do. I get taxed on my streaming.
well, perhaps Chris
That's
Group
why
is
you're
here.
double taxing, we're double taxing now on streaming with this proposal. And
Well, we passed it.
no, I'm paying, well, I understand that, but it hasn't been passed out yet. And so we're paying, we're already paying, just want to make clear, we're already paying a sales tax with streaming. Okay, and you added another tax. And now the tax department says it costs $1 million to implement what they're already taxing.
It's an excise tax,
Well,
which means that you're looking at a different tax.
I don't have
base.
any confidence in that department to be able to.
Thank you for your view. We have 181, and we are assuming that even after we pay the tax department to do the necessary administrative work to establish the tax liability and collective, that we are having money available to support this budget. So this budget assumes the revenues from that bill. Which I think we're at what, after paying for the 1.1, it was four
It's total of 6, so
to 6, so
4.9.
yeah, so the revenues are assumed here as available for the base. So, but the setup is a one-time, and that's why
I
the.
realized I was shooting the messenger and I apologize for shooting the messenger,
We do that.
but they,
That's why I get paid the big bucks.
I understand, you get it.
So moving right along, Emily, let's keep going.
Yeah, and so the last piece that has been updated on this is S213 line 52 is at $2 million. We consolidated those lines sort of into one line of to get rid of the high priority statewide flood hazard standards, and we scrubbed that number a little bit and brought it down to 2 million for one-time investments to implement that bill, which gets us down to within $10,000 of balance for one-time investments.
That's about as close as one could get.
That's a nice little number in case, I rounded wrong or something.
Well, it shows you how close we are here. So committee, there are other one-times and which will go on a contingent appropriation. If we want to, at this point, the question is, have we captured on this spreadsheet, the committee discussions and how we would use, we've gone through this sheet numerous times, so this is, we could close this out and then move on to contingents, send person.
Emily, can you just explain the difference there between line 42 and 53, those two? So we're doing $1 million
The governor recommended it. That
Right.
was always in.
Yeah, and it's in the Senate column there. And then
Yes,
that's why we took it out below.
Well,
Before we had it twice before.
it was,
Yeah,
Two
we
and
were
a half.
adding to the
We're
governor's
adding to it.
million.
I think there's been an ask to do a $2 million or $2.5 million invest or transfer to capitalize that fund. The governor did $1 million,
Right.
we were carrying an additional $1 million and. Couldn't make-
But we just carried it down here under 213 instead of.
Yes,
We could have easily put it up.
Yeah.
Or-
but it's
Right here.
additional, that's why we did it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're all done.
So, we can move on to contingent, as I said. At this point, it appears that, and it could change, and it could be for the better, and it could be for the worse, who knows? About 35 million ahead of revenue forecast. So, the House, has already anticipated, 23.5. So this is how we have identified and the ones that have come on. Now, there are other budget requests and for one-time money and there's only so much, and so we have many more requests for funding than we have the ability to fund. And so you might say, well, this isn't on here. And that's why we want to make sure that you've gone back and you've looked at what your committee has recommended. We have, for example, do we want a 40,000 one time for a tariff report due and radio transmission lines improvement? Do we want 40 million and the 40,000? I think the Health and Welfare Committee had wanted to continue a program that was started and funded by a grant. That was the empty arms. But we have many one times that, and the other thing I would caution is I would not want to put anything necessarily on one time that we know people are going to say, well, this is a program or a service we want to continue. So that's one of the other factors here, because we have millions more for base spending than we're going to have. And so this idea that somehow we'll get it on the list and next year will be better. I will tell you, next year it's going to be very, very difficult because the Pay Act that was negotiated is going to put very significant pressure on the budget. We know that the pension plus payment moves up to 15 million. And the way the budget has been constructed is to use one time to meet that ongoing obligation. We know that this year's revenue forecast upgrade of the 29 million is not all ongoing. Maybe only a third is, but the governor assumed it was all ongoing. And so we're saying, all right, Governor, if you think that's good, then we'll agree with you. And if you dig a hole, then next year you figure it out. So and I could go on and on. So if anybody thinks that somehow getting something in this year, next year is going to be countdown to Nirvana, it's not Nirvana. It is going to be one of the most difficult budgetary environments that we are encountering. So I'm very cautious, and I'm very cautious about the idea that that something will be better, because I think we've got some very significant pressures. So with that caveat, and then this was just an attempt to extract some, it is not all. So if somebody can say, well, how come mine isn't on here? It's because we have put a list here, and if you want to substitute and say, gee, what I want isn't on here, then what do you want to take off is really kind of the challenge. So
shouldn't we be using, if we've got like 40 to 43 million projected to have as a surplus in our annual income, why aren't we using that to cover the wages increase? we should, keep that, so, cause we know the wages are an ongoing thing, and if the revenues that are coming in are continuing to grow a little bit, if that was hooked to that and then move the other money to one,
Well,
you know,
this,
so that.
this budget includes $31 million to fund the pay act for state employees.
Yeah, that's wrong.
And that's been negotiated. That's been negotiated, so we don't
You gotta
pay.
pay it.
And so we've got to pay it. And of
Where
course,
the money's coming from is what I think is,
well, it's accommodated in the governor's budget. He budgeted in money for pay act. So it's already here. And, the final negotiations only completed, I think, last week. So, the pay act that we have, it's gonna end up in the budget. But because the money's already here. So I'm just simply saying the second year of the pay act on top of a 6% that essentially got negotiated for this year, it's going to create a lot of pressure. And so I know, and I'm once again, I'm back, I realize I'm like a broken record, but anybody who thinks a study guarantees them anything is going to be sadly mistaken, because in some of these bills are all kinds of requests for studies, analysis, cost projections, and we have very little capacity to broaden that base of spending. So otherwise, we would be probably doing more for what we consider as our key service organizations. And
Do something for reach out.
well, we would do something for Reach Up, which hasn't been on anybody's list except mine and maybe Senator Westman's. And so, this is the environment in which we're making this budget. But I'm simply saying, although we don't do a 2-year budget like the capital bill, if we're looking ahead with what we know for known pressures and demands and some of the challenges that were sort of are being created by some of the assumptions made in this budget. It's just putting everybody on notice that it is not going to be an easy year, because I know people say, oh, let's just fund it for half a year and next year, you know, and that is the camel's nose in the tent budgeting, and it gets us in trouble. And it got us in trouble with pensions, and it's gotten us in trouble with the Vermont State Colleges. It's gotten us in trouble with a whole host of things. And what happens is your current obligation and responsibility end up getting cannibalized or negatively impacted. And so this is, everybody's coming in and they've got a particular program or a particular priority. And I understand that. So this is next year's agenda for anybody who's sitting around this table. I do not think it's gonna be any easier than it's been for us this year.
Good.
Senator Sears.
Well, I wanna comment that I don't begrudge the state employees for their increases. They're well deserved and they do hard work. But what I'm about to say is based on the history during tough budget times. The last time I remember a large settlement was in tough budget times. And it made those times the next year even more difficult. And there was a downward spiral in the support for community-based programs like our designated agencies and other programs. And that was a unfortunate process that I went through, and I hope we can avoid that the next time around. But frankly, once you do that, you've got the education problems with education funding. And those increases in school budget, school taxes that people are seeing, and you've got these local programs that aren't getting funded properly, they're losing staff, they're unable to meet the demand. We're already seeing a crisis, and I think this is something else worse than that crisis. So I'm gonna go back to number 10 on the list. Is this the 1.43 that was in a House bill paid for by some
one,
tax that nobody would ever owe it at one time in the house.
this is getting into the $3 million for the community coalitions, which was one of the key
Right.
preventive initiatives that is funded by the excise tax from the cannabis, revenues. And so the bill said, a third up to a maximum of 10 million.
Yep.
The governor's, administration, estimated that the excise tax this year would be about 10 million. So a third of it was the 3 million.
Okay.
So consistent with the legislative intent, the governor put 3 million in the base to support the continued work of these community coalitions. The House, what they did is took out almost 1.6 million of the 3, which was base, replaced it with opioid settlement money, which is one time. And then they used the base reduction that they took from the community coalition to fund an increase to the recovery centers. So what you've created is, if you do that, is another hole.
Right, I'm just worried that this will be considered base 1.43, that they will rely on in 26 for funding. I don't, but I'm absolutely supportive of the recovery centers, always have been, and their request, so there's no question there that they deserve it. I just want to be understanding that this may not be available in 26.
That's true. That's true. You're absolutely right.
To make that clear to them, this is a one-time funding. And I hope they get it, and I hope they get it in 26, but there's no guarantee.
And I don't know, I asked, joint fiscal because this was the request, but I don't know what the base is. So this would involve a very significant increase on the current appropriation. Because we were trying, everybody else was getting 3%. And do you have the answer to that now?
So they received 6.23 in total, all of them. And so 1.4,
Remember when we used to be
Which would
fighting
be
about
matched,
20,000
right?
each of them, right?
the general fund is only like
Remember when you started yours?
830,000, so it's 177% increase. I know that sounds.
Well, I know, but
Well, they started, I mean, I just remember when we started the one in Newport, it was like $20,000.
yeah, and I'll be, if you-
So, I mean, you're starting at a.
it's a very, I guess what you're saying is it's a very significant increase over last year.
Well, it's a significant increase if, we
It's not
maintain,
one time.
it, on this list, it's a significant increase.
Yeah.
If we
but-
maintain the 35 million, above revenue estimates, because that's right on the $35 million
You're
line.
absolutely right, and that's part of what you've got to go through. And then there are other things here that you could say, well, and when we look at the base, it's, which we will finalize tomorrow with what we have. You'll find that there's no room to move much around, so the question really is, you got it, like we were saying to the, conservation districts. Well, yes, you got 200, you would have 200,000 here, I believe, and we're like saying, how do you say to people, and we're getting this all over the place, well, you gave us this much more and that becomes your new base. And that's, gonna be the issue here, because I think we put them on, conservation districts, one,
There's some in the base, some.
so we restored the base, the 112,500, and brought them level funded, but they wanted 3 million. And, on the list, I think you had wanted to give them some more money, 200 or was 150 or something, one time. So, which is here, one time. So that's where we are. So we can look at this, and you're absolutely right, Senator Westman. 35 does not get us down everything on this list.
No.
And this is only kind of trying to
Is this,
extract, the areas of interest that have come. So we can add more to it.
because this list is.
So it becomes meaningless if you add stuff that we don't really think will ever get.
I know, and I don't advise doing that. I would not, I think, 35 seems to be reasonable. You could say, well, and, you could make it a little bit more than that. I would absolutely not want to get above 40.
And this is right about at the 40 level.
So that's my only,
39, so.
Yeah, well, that's pretty close to 40. Yes.
and so, the question is, are there things here that you would say, no, I want to put something else in lieu of? Now, we can go down through them. The first two, I think we pretty much agreed. Senator, Pershlik has some language relative to the 3.5 for the hazard mitigation. And
So one above that I had problems with,
what's that?
the 20.
Well, it's probably too low.
Yeah, oh yeah, we should put another 20 with that.
You should.
Like, dig it up in Chittenden County, they're doing so well.
The only thing I can say is the more money you put in one place, it comes out, it's, somebody else is paying for it. This idea that somehow there's all this additional money, is not true. People, and generally it's our poorest Vermonters that are actually experiencing impact. So, I remember a couple of years ago where we did the first increase to the state supplement to the SSI benefit in 20 years. Most people in this building didn't even know what the AABD supplement was. That shows you how long and how pitiful that group of poor Vermonters who are elderly or with disabilities have fared in this budgetary environment. So, you can say what you want, somebody is having the impact somewhere. So I'm gonna keep going. We have the dam revolving fund, and that was back to our earlier discussion about moving that to the contingent. Healthy Homes is the one that a program operated by ANR that helps low-income households with their water and sewer so that they can
Keeps places livable.
keep them livable and stay in that home. This would take VHIP and split it, 2 million higher up on the list. IIJ and match the, it's, it was that federal, infrastructure, match. And yeah. And so, the House had removed or reduced the money that we had set aside by $5 million. And the administration and that we had set aside like we did for transportation to serve as the match for those federal dollars. This would restore and only reduce the set aside by 2.5 million. The House took 5. We're like saying, we want to make sure we've got the money to draw down those federal dollars. And so this is putting back at the least half.
So that 2.5 will pull down to how much?
Well, a lot of it is 80-20. Yeah, it's a lot. And this would be this is the match that has been reserved for the ANR related projects under the IIJA legislation. The food bank, they wanted 5 million. And the only thing I can say is I hope everybody in this room who's concerned about hunger is a sustaining member of the Vermont Food Bank.
Or contributes.
Or contribute.
Their local food shop.
Or their local food shop, because
The plan here would be to tilt that money toward the local food shops. Is mostly volunteer.
This money, there'd be additions.
no,
That,
this
no,
is it.
that, you split that between the food bank and the local food shelves. There's 130 local food shelves and they're all volunteer. And, that, I might remind people at this table, the supplement for, EBT cards went away in the early spring. And it meant $82 for almost every a month for supplemental food. So
That,
and the attempt here would be get the money as close to the communities as we
Well, do you
could.
have language? Do you have
I,
language on that?
Amy has the language that I got that we put together.
Because
and-
of what, because behind this is if this money goes out, is having money actually go to the community food shelves. And then they can purchase,
Yeah, all of the food shelves, and we heard it in testimony, what they need is flexibility, and what most of them are the shortest on is protein at the end of the month for families.
so. But, and if we're going to do that, we need language that makes it clear how that 1.31 is to go out.
Okay.
And there's money for the food bank as well as some administrative.
We'll make sure that,
So we need language to go with that.
Yep.
Um,
and I'll work with the two of you.
all right. Long-term care incentives, this is in response to the difficulty of hiring in our nursing homes. Geriatric nursing is one of the most difficult under the best of circumstances. I was pleased to read though, from the chancellor of the state college system, is that they've now moved up nursing up to 1,000 students. And that is incredible in light of that nursing shortage study that we have been able to really increase capacity to that level. So 1,000 is a major step.
I would just say to people at the table, when we look at the nursing homes budgets, in 2020, the contract nurses was about 20 million. The contracts within our nursing homes, in 2023 was almost $64 billion. And we struggled through the present budget year we're in the budget, and the budget, the VA, to find 17 million that isn't as much as for emergency aid. And we've had 2 nursing homes close in the last 8 to 10 months in Senator Starr's district. And so the initiatives around this, Senator Lyons and I were found together.
So this would be incentive, they'd be hiring centers.
Yeah.
Um,
And
and we
particularly,
need them.
and particularly for LNAs and nursing homes.
Do we have language for that?
I've
Yeah.
got language
Okay.
right here that
All right.
Amy has.
All
should
right,
have.
is that something great he's gonna review with us? Okay. Serve, earn and learn, they wanted 2.3 million. This is a program that actually is a consortium of 3 entities, Youth Conservation Board, Vermont Works for Women and Audubon. It is the one program, when we're looking at all the workforce incentives, it's gone to teachers incentives, dental hygienists, healthcare professionals. And this is a program that really serves Vermonters who need basic employment and skills. And they are, there's the forgotten kingdom.
Right,
Then this is kind of the forgotten group of Vermonters in terms of getting them into the workforce. And so, they've done weatherization, we went to a program. So this is what this program does, and I guess it's nice to see 3 organizations come together and collaborate, rather than each one of them saying, fund me, fund me. So this is what Serve, Earn and Learn is. Recovery centers, additional VHAP, and then the remaining IIJA match. So that gets you to 39.73. So we can go back and rejigger this, or are there things that you would say? I would say every request we have has merit.
oh, yeah,
The question really becomes what gets prioritized relative to who is benefiting from it, the nature of the need. exactly how to make sure we leverage federal dollars and stretch the money we have in the fairest way possible. So, that is where we are on that, and it's 10 minutes of 3 already. So, unless people want to take a chance to look at it, and then we can, at this point, tentatively close it out, and then we're going to go on to, some language this afternoon, and we're also going to go on to the miscellaneous tax bill. And the miscellaneous tax bill is important because it includes some revenues that can help us provide some basic response to things that are not addressed in either the governor's proposed budget or in the House proposed budget. And into increases for our parent-child centers and our SSAs, our DAs, our programs that serve our seniors and people with disabilities. None of that was, in spite of all the bills and so forth. There are certain things that just didn't get addressed in this committee, and that's where we want to start first. So, the fee bill, and miscellaneous tax bill is going to be really important here. And Emily, do you have anything else you want to add at this point?
Not yet, not right now.
Okay, so what I'm going to do
You want to
is,
get into this?
what?
You want
We're tentatively, we're saying we're closing this out. Tomorrow's the deadline, so we've got to start moving stuff and finishing it up. You think, Chris, we can do the miscellaneous tax bill now?
I'm ready whenever you are.
Okay, why don't we do that now?
Can you distribute copies?
I have it now.
Here.
I think it should be all right.
They're all these are all packets.
Yes.
Those are all for you.
Sure.
Right.
Yes.
That's your audience.
Thank you, Jane.
So, Robert Chris, Joint Fiscal, good afternoon, everyone. Madam Chair, I know the committee's got a lot on their plate, so I wasn't planning to go line by line
We do
through this
not want
bill.
to go, we want to know where the money is.
Yeah, I figured it'd be easiest for folks to follow along by looking at the fiscal note. You do have copies of the full language as well as a, extremely helpful one-page summary chart that, Herbie Keaton and Ledge Council put together. But I just want to draw your attention to a couple things in the fiscal note and this is for H 546, the annual miscellaneous tax bill. Bottom line up front, the Senate Committee on Finance version raises approximately 18.8 million of additional revenue for the general fund
Yeah.
through increases to various financial regulation fees. There's also a provision that would increase education fund revenues by approximately $200,000 by closing a loophole for casual sales of ATVs, which are not currently subject to the sales tax. So I'm not going to go through everything, but I just wanted to draw your attention to a few things. Section 1, if you see the bill changes a funding source for the per parcel fee that is budgeted every year for the tax department from the education fund to the general fund. I don't want anybody here to have the impression that this is shifting a cost to the general fund. You've already been funding this out of the general fund. This is to align statute with existing appropriations practices.
So is this the per parcel fee that goes to each town?
Yes.
The listers.
Yeah, the listers. That's not for the tax authority.
The, I think it routed through the tax department to go there, but yeah, this is appropriate like E 138 or 139 of the budget. I'm flipping over to page 2 now, sections 3 and 4, that's your annual link up. That is a must pass provision, every year that links our income and estate taxes to the federal taxes every year. Section 5 is an expansion of the renter credit to expand the utilization of the renter credit.
Oh, we already did that, simplify it and make more.
There were a lot of changes that were made several years ago, and the tax department proposed increasing the eligibility criteria from 50% of AMI to 65 to more fully utilize the existing appropriation. It wouldn't have any additional budgetary impact beyond that. I'm scrolling down to section 10 is the fuel tax sunset extension. Recall that this was included in the governor's recommend for FY 25. Your colleagues in the House decided to instead reflect this in the miscellaneous tax bill rather than in the budget. This is another must pass provision because otherwise the fuel tax would sunset at the end of this fiscal year. And that, just to remind everybody, is not your gas and diesel tax that goes to the T fund. That's your tax on heating fuels that funds the home weatherization programs. Section 11 and 12, again, was recommended by the governor in the budget to extend the health IT fund and the healthcare claims tax until June 30th, 2026. Rather than reflect, just like with the fuel tax, rather than reflect this in the budget, your colleagues decided to reflect it in miscellaneous tax. Section 13 and 14 was added by your colleagues across the hall in the Senate Finance Committee. That is the provision that extends the sales and use tax to casual sales of ATVs. Currently, sales through a dealer are covered by the 6%, but casual sales are not covered.
To treat them the same as snowmobiles and
Exactly.
Much casual.
between you and me, Bobby,
Yeah.
I sold you an ATV.
Why isn't that called private? Like everywhere, where else would it say private?
That the statute calls it a casual.
We call
sale.
it private when we talk
That
about
would be
it.
good luck tracking that.
It's,
Why even have it in there?
it's collected at the time of registration, so it's not. at the
It's
point of
not,
sale.
it's not that you have to rely on me to
It's like,
pay it, Bobby.
it's like purchase and use when you register a car.
TV, why would you even register?
Because now,
Is that the law?
It's not.
No, it came up in transportation and Senator Ingalls brought it up because a dealer was bringing it up
We
and
really don't know.
the ATVs now with 4 passengers and many of them are very, very
Yes,
expensive.
but
No, it's not a deal.
Bobby's correct, unless you ride your ATV on anything public,
Yes,
you don't have to register.
yeah, that's true. Farmers use them all the time.
And farmers use them all the time, they don't register.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but if the road is near the farm, you can use it on there.
Yes, you can get from one side.
Sometimes the
road.
One side the
Look,
road.
this is only if you go to register it, otherwise we don't care. With something that,
And he's not getting his money.
yeah, and,
Nothing comes trans,
no,
goes to the education.
it goes to the education fund.
Since you're sharing.
Yeah, this was, just to be clear, this was an anomaly in the law that I think their colleagues thought should close to make things consistent with
You
other.
always need somebody to blame and you're in.
All right, let's
So
keep going.
let's go to the real meat here, section 16 to 19, that's the financial regulation fees section. And these sections would increase several fees collected by DFR related to securities and insurance. You will see a table on page 5 of the fiscal note that summarizes the fiscal impacts from these different changes, but in the aggregate, you're looking at $18.8 million of additional revenue to the general fund.
You're calling this the line to balance the budget.
Well said, Senator.
I am. Does this reflect our discussion of this morning?
It does not.
Okay.
This reflects what is in the bill before you right now. The vast majority of this revenue comes from mutual fund registrations and renewals. We charge a fee like many states do. So many of these do not hit sort of individuals. They are charged against the financial services companies that put out these products. The other significant thing that might be of interest to the committee was your colleagues across the hall added a new section 20, which is very similar to language that the body already passed in S60. The House included in their version of this bill a working group to look at local revenue sharing among municipalities. The Senate Finance Committee alternatively proposed that instead of that working group, include the language that had already passed the Senate at S60, which would allow any town to enact a local option tax without going through the charter amendment process that requires General Assembly approval.
You'd like that?
I love it.
Yeah, good.
Probably don't support it.
All right, so, that's what came over. Now, we have an amendment. And it's similar to what we did with the DMV fees last year. And that is, pull them from this bill and carry them in the budget because they're needed to, support the budget. In order to even deal with the pitiful difference we had to make, a $25 adjustment to generate a bit more money, $600,000. And so what the amendment would do here is a couple of things. But we don't need to worry about the amount. That's something that we're gonna do because we're folding them into the budget, so they'll do it as part of the budget work. But in order to move the miscellaneous tax bill out, what we have is amendment here that would basically strip out the fees and put them in the budget. We did with the DMV fees last year. In addition, there are two other changes. One is just an extension of the timeline for machinery and equipment tax credit that would be extended to 2030. And then on the last page, as you can see, the sales tax exemption on advanced wood burners would also be extended from July of 24 to July for the 2027. So there are two date extensions which have been discussed with our committee across the hall and the fee removal. So the amendment does two things.
I'm
Go
just
ahead.
wondering, we're just using this as a vehicle because these dates need
Yes,
changing?
yes.
Okay.
And these are, and it just came to our attention after the bill came out.
So it's unrelated to our revenue.
No, they're not related. It's just if we were, this was a good vehicle to do the two date changes.
Yeah.
And, our plan all along was to take the fees and bottom them into the budget bill itself.
And we ran it by the sheriff.
Yes. So, the other thing that we're obviously on a different note, and that is the pay act language is. We've got a placeholder, we've got the funding, so that's probably something that will come in. Once we get into committee and conference, because I don't think it's ready yet for. Us to incorporate, but this is to do two date changes and to strip out the fees, knowing that. And do exactly what we did last year with the DMV fees. So Andy, do you want to speak to your date extension?
That's speaks for itself.
I was gonna say it's pretty self-explanatory.
That was amended.
Okay, our clerk is ready to clerk and he's made the motion to move the bill favorably as.
Clerk made the.
Is it a conflict of interest?
Yes. Do we have a second or are we just gonna talk?
I'll second
One,
She's great.
Bird,
Yes.
Lyons.
Yes.
Birchlight,
it. Yes.
Sears,
Yes.
Star,
Yes.
President Jessen, Mitchell,
yes,
who's reporting?
I've been responded. All right, thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
At this point, it's, a little after 3. I think maybe we'll need to take a brief break and then maybe can come and look over some language. Yeah, so.